Hi, good morning, and welcome to this morning's webinar, How EU Companies Compete Through Sustainability. This is a webinar organized by the Haga Initiative in Sweden, a Swedish business network. And my name is Nina Ekelund, and I'm the chairman of the Haga Initiative. So one might think it's a setback for the business community's climate work in Europe, but I would say it is not. Politics has slowed down the pace, and unfortunately, we are seeing changes in policy that is partly weakening the incentives for the green transition. But companies are continuing their work. A few months ago, we chose to look at around 40 companies to see how they describe their sustainability work and how it strengthens their business. What is interesting is that sustainability is just not a regulatory requirement, it's a competitive advantage. They describe that their sustainability work has contributed to creating innovation, strengthening their market position, not least meeting customer demands. We will present several reasons from the companies. So what I want you to remember, sustainability is a hygiene factor for European companies, and it gives them a major competitive advantage. This needs to be backed up by politics. You can find the report on our website at the Haga Initiative. And the report is From Transition to Advantage, how EU companies compete through sustainability. We can take the next slide, please. And here we see the Haga companies. And I just want to hand over to my colleague, Gabrielle Tillberg. She's the head of policy analysis at the Haga Initiative, and who will lead us through this morning webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nina, and good morning to everyone who is listening to this webinar. Like Nina said, we're here to present a new report that we're releasing today. And we have our colleague Nussara who will walk us through the case study where we've looked at these 40 companies. But before that, we want to do a little bit of a reverse presentation today. I'm going to start with a few slides where we actually start with the conclusions of the report. We have a few main messages that we would like that you guys keep at the forefront as you're listening to Nussara's presentation. That is more of a deep dive into the companies, but for the time being, we want to zoom out a little bit and give some insights that came from this report and the work that we do in general as a business network. And you can take the next slide, please. So what we see in our day-to-day work with the Haga Initiative as a business network that works towards pushing policy for more ambitious and a faster climate transition, as well as this report, we see that sustainability efforts, just like Nina mentioned in the introduction, have become mainstreamed into business strategies for these companies. And for us, again, it's not a new insight, but it's no small insight regardless. But one thing that is key and that is quite evident also from this report is that businesses, they don't operate in silos. And so what do we mean by that? Well, we see that there is a strong need for policy to be predictable, to be stable, transparent, and long-term in its design and decisions. And this is one of the prerequisites for companies who are driving the green transition. And you can take the next slide, please. And so we have three sort of main messages or key takeaways that we want you guys to have when you read this report. And the first one is that companies value an ambitious EU climate policy agenda. We are, I think, all well aware of the current geopolitical situation, and there's a lot of instability at the moment when it comes to security, when it comes to energy, but also when it comes to commitment to strong climate policy from the policy space. And this is also something that there are certain signals coming out from the EU that this is also the case, that there are certain risks that we see of backsliding on climate policy. And what we want this report to highlight the most is that companies really see added value in a strong and an accelerated green transition. And for instance, in forms of innovation opportunities, also cost and energy savings, but also a clear market demand. And then in addition as well, it's a way for these businesses to manage both financial and also climate-related risks. And you can take the next slide, please. Thank you. And the second main point, which is also the background to this report in itself, is that we're no strangers to the argument that sustainability is profitable. It's something that we work towards and with each and every day. But we also wanted to take this opportunity to break it down into more detail, to better understand and to be able to use it as a greater lever towards the policy space as well. So what this report does is that it offers a more in-depth look at this specific argument, that it is profitable for businesses to be sustainable. It offers more concrete ideas and examples of how businesses perceive their sustainable strategies and business strategies as a main core of their competitiveness. And the hope is that once we start to understand this argument and talk about it in more granular ways, it also becomes something that pushes and puts pressure on policymakers to not just maintain current, climate policies in place, but also to increase ambition as they see that it's something that's valuable to businesses. And again, like Nina said in the beginning, we see that sustainability has gone from being perceived as this standalone goodwill issue to becoming a hygiene factor in business models. And then you can switch to the next slide. And lastly, we also want to see what enabled businesses to end up in this sort of momentum of pushing the green transition forward. And one of the key things that we see is that early climate policies have been key in pushing businesses. And for instance, we have the EU ETS, and in more recent years, the last few years, we have the Fit for 55 agenda of the EU that have truly enabled businesses to forward their work and allow them to mainstream sustainability into their business strategies. And then we also have examples of some more national climate policies. We have the early adopters. Sweden was one of those countries that adopted a carbon tax in the 1990s, which has been instrumental. And then also national climate frameworks that we have both the UK and Sweden again that were quite early on adopting those climate frameworks, which enabled and also allowed for this sort of stable, long-term, predictable rules for businesses and to guide, both their business decision, but also their investment decisions. And so the key message that we want to leave you with is going forward, it is very, very imperative that the policymakers really stand up for a continuous, ambitious climate agenda. We're moving into the post-2030 framework at this stage where we have the EU trying to set the rules for how do we achieve the 2040 and then going towards the 2050 climate goal in the Union. And we do see that this is something that adds values for companies. And if they have the right policies in place, it's something that these progressive companies that see value indeed respond and push forward as well. So that was a brief introduction. Now to the actual nitty-gritty detail of things. I want to introduce our colleague Nussara, who's going to walk us through the report that we're launching today.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nussara. Currently, I'm studying a Master of Sustainable Development at Uppsala University, and I'm doing an internship at Haga Initiative. Next slide, please. Yes. So this presentation and this report is the result of my internship project. When we started this project, we discussed whether, like as Gabrielle mentioned, we discussed whether the EU climate and environmental regulations may disadvantage European companies in the global market. And at the same time, nowadays, the political landscape surrounding the green transition has become increasingly polarized. Next slide, please. As you can see, yes, as you can see, the latest global risks report from the World Economic Forum. If you can, yes. So like concerns about geopolitical and economic risks have become more prominent in recent years, surpassing climate risks in the short term. A few years ago, climate risks and environmental risks consistently rank at the very top. But however, in the long term, as you can see on the right-hand side, when looking at the long-term outlook, climate and environmental risks remain among the most significant global concerns. This suggests that while people clearly recognize the seriousness of climate risks, economic stability and competitiveness are also seen as political priorities. Therefore, the aim of this project is to investigate whether companies can actually gain competitive advantages from their sustainability efforts, rather than viewing this as the regulation obligations. Next slide, please. So we looked through European companies' digital media official websites and their most recent annual and sustainability reports to understand how companies frame sustainability efforts with a focus on climate and the extent to which they view it as a driver of competitive advantage. So in total, 40 companies were analyzed, selected from stock market in Sweden, the United Kingdom, and Europe, which consists of 8 countries and 32 industries in total. Next slide, please. After analyzing this, we found the companies' competitive advantages and grouped them into 5 key categories. Please note that companies may address multiple categories at the same time and be counted for in more than one category, which in our report we present the examples under combining several categories. So the result is that the most common advantage is market-driven growth opportunities, which is almost half of all companies identified it. This category is that many companies see customer demand for sustainable products and services as a key source of new business opportunities. The second most common advantage is innovation and product development, which is around 24% of all companies use innovation and product development to support their sustainability goals, which enhances their competitive advantage. The rest of key categories are energy saving for the customer, business resilience and climate adaptation, operational efficiency and cost savings, which today I am giving you these 3 categories examples, but you can see more examples in our report. Next slide, please. So this is the third category, energy saving for the customer. Companies provide products and services that improve energy efficiency and reduce energy consumption for their customer. Can you show the, yes, thank you. So this is the example from JM, which is residential real estate development and construction in Sweden. They develop low energy buildings that add value for their customer by reducing energy consumption. The customer pay less for the household costs and lower their climate footprint. Next slide, please. Next category is business resilience and climate adaptation. Many companies realize the climate change risks, so they prepare and adapt their business by strengthening their supply chain, investing in the climate adaptive practices, and partnering with stakeholders. Unilever is one of the examples. They realize these risks and wants to build a more resilient business over the long term. They are working in implement regenerative agriculture practices across 1 million hectares by 2030 to support long-term supply security while reducing the impact of climate change. Next slide, please. And the last example is operational efficiency and cost saving category. Through company sustainability efforts such as optimizing resource use, waste reduction, efficiency logistic and supply chain management, the company reduced their operational costs. For example, at City, hygiene and household products from Sweden achieved cost saving of 1.5 billion Swedish kronor through an optimized production structure, efficiency improvement, and reduced raw material and energy consumption. At the same time, they reduced Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon emissions. Next slide, please. So that were 3 examples. And in addition to 40 European companies, we present and analyze Haga Initiative members. So compared to the European result, the same category, market-driven growth opportunities, is the most frequent mentioned in the companies. And the rest categories rank slightly different as presented in this chart. Later, 2 companies from our member will discuss their practices. Next slide, please. To conclude this report and this project answered the question, do companies actually gain tangible benefit from their sustainability efforts? And the answer is yes. They create competitive advantages and long-term business value with these 5 key categories. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Nussara, for that very fruitful presentation. Now we want to invite some business actors into the discussion. You can switch the slide, please. And unfortunately, we've had a little bit of a technical challenge this morning, but we hope that Håkan will be with us briefly. With us, we have Sara Davidsson, who is the Sustainability and Compliance Director at Stena Recycling.
Good morning, Gabrielle.
Good morning, Sara. Lovely to see you. You had a bit of a challenge logging in, but you managed. And Håkan had no challenge logging in, but he was thrown out. So hopefully he'll join us. We hopefully will have Håkan Björklund, who is the head of public affairs at Axfood, with us briefly. But I'm thinking that we'll start with you, Sara, and then just fingers crossed that Håkan will be able to join. We shared a couple of questions with you prior, but I want to throw in a bonus question and no pressure, but do you have any sort of just initial reactions or spontaneous feelings after hearing the presentation of this report?
I think Nussara has written an interesting report with a fresh perspective, and I think both the method that she used in going through the 5 different drivers for sustainable businesses and fossil-free business approaches, and focusing on the business models and focusing on market demands. So I think that is really interesting. And secondly, I like that our Haga Initiative is continuously over time studying business effects on approaches that take down the climate, our climate impact. So I like that approach very much.
Yes, and I definitely agree. And I think for us who work with this on a daily basis, it's always good to continuously also learn, right? Learn about your own arguments and dig deeper into sort of the reason why we're doing it, but to continue to develop and deepen the arguments, and because they also continuously develop as time goes on, and as we see technological development, and as we see policy development. So
for
completely agree with you on that one.
And also to look at what what are the challenges?
Yes.
Where do we succeed over time, and what are the challenges, and how does this change? Because for sure, and I will get into that in answering your questions also, but it's not that we can succeed by ourselves. The market is very much linked to policies and the rules and regulations that we have. So this is not a self-playing piano in any way.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great analogy. Okay, let's dig into these questions. So you work at Stena Recycling, and please do take a couple of minutes to just present your company as well, as we might have some non-Swedish actors and people who are listening to this as well. And after that, I'm curious to hear how does your company, Stena Recycling, compete through sustainability?
Right, so Stena Recycling, I think the name in itself is a giveaway to what our core business is, but we have been recycling metals, hazardous waste, and plastics, and different types of materials since the 1930s. So it's a very long-standing family-owned business coming from Sweden and Gothenburg, but we are in place in 6 different European countries in the recycling business. And so answering your question also, I mean, we have companies definitely in 2 different categories. For some, price is still the main driver. And sometimes, depending on what kind of material we're speaking of, recycled material is not competitive. So plastics is one example, and we've seen in Europe now for the past year, since 2024 and 2025, when we had some, we have had some disruptions in the global market. We have the war in Ukraine, etc. So plastics recycling is really, really struggling in the European Union right now. But for some materials, there is a success, of course, metals, and also hazardous waste, where we have lots of rules and regulations. But we do have a fair share of customers, namely our larger customers, and also customers acting on the global market. So not only in Sweden, but also on the global market, where they need to be in the forefront of their competitiveness. And here we see that recycled materials and a transparent value chain is an advantage for us. So what we've done as a company is we have invested in the Stena Nordic Recycling Center in Halmstad in Sweden, and that is the size of 80 soccer fields or football fields, depending on if you're from the US or listening in from Europe. So, it's the size of the Vatican State. So you've been there, Gabrielle. It's a huge facility specialized in refined recycled materials. So our business is to take recycling to the very forefront. And to do that, we have our own research and development department to always be looking on what is up there in the very front of technology and potential. And of course, I mean, this needs to be recycling material is done by the private sector in Sweden, so it's not something that is supported by state funding or anything like that. So this needs to be market driven. And we do see that this is an advantage, taking recycling to the very forefront.
It is indeed, and it is a huge facility for sure. It's a huge what do you say, bet on the future, so to speak, to truly and again, like I mentioned, and we talk about this quite often, also seeing the symbiotic relationship between also sustainable efforts, but also looking at issues like resilience, security around supply chains, and in that aspect, Stena Recycling is a truly important actor. So
Yeah.
very interesting.
But to do this, as I said in the beginning, we do need long-term policies also that
Absolutely.
support resilience, that support
Yes.
competitiveness, and support climate, climate adaptation, and therefore need to support renewables and fossil-free materials.
Yeah.
So this is key to
Most
us and
definitely.
to all companies, I think.
Wonderful.
Right.
We see, I'm going to pause you there for a minute. Håkan is with us in the building, I was going to say,
Great.
but on the screen. Wonderful. Welcome, Håkan. We have, as I said before, when you were still trying to log on, Håkan Björklund is the head of public affairs at Axfood. And Sara has briefly introduced Stena Recycling and also replied to the question, how does your company compete through sustainability? So I'm curious to what you have to say about this, but please also go ahead and present, take a moment to present Axfood as well, for those who are listening in who might not be familiar.
Thank you. Axfood is the number 2 player on the Swedish market for food retail. And we have been on the Swedish stock exchange with little more than 20 years. And we have various brands, and we do own supermarket as Willys, City Gross, and also actually in the rural areas, there we are the dominant player with the small shops and facing those challenges. So that is the background to Axfood. It's important for us to be integrated. That means that we do own our own fleet for transport. So starting with the issue for today, that we think that sustainability strengthens our food chain's brands. That is the utmost importance. We see broad consumer recognition, and we also see that in Willys, which is our low price concept, actually consumers are not expecting to get as much sustainable certified foods so cheap. So there we have something positive, and we have seen that people go to the stores because, okay, I don't have so much money, but I can be contributing to a better planet and so on. So that is one thing. The other one is that we have our private label brands, in our case, Garant and some others. And here we can see that the environmental added value appeals to customers. And we also see that we have to do it the right way. I mean, we must really come up with concrete results. It's not enough to just have mumbo jumbo from a corporate. We have to do it, and we do that in one way, that is we integrate sustainability into our business model. So the same way that we have objectives for profit, we also have objectives for reducing food waste. And here, to go into one concrete example, in 2024, Axfood reduced food waste with 50% compared with 2015. And the key here is to monitor food waste. And then you see the enormous possibility to make savings and to come up with truly initiative methods. And you mentioned that in the starting of the seminar. How can we prevent? It's not a quick fix. We have to do it systematically, and we have to do it the same way we do with other company objectives. And here, I think, in our case, it's important that we do not have only incentive programs for the leadership for profits. We should also have, and we do have that, exact the same objectives. We have to achieve our environmental objectives, and we have to break down those objectives. So that is one way of targeting sustainability. And the other way is a little more that with softer values. I mean, 50 years ago, when you joined a company and you were a young, bright talent, you said, what is in it for me? How can I be rich? How can I get status? And we now see that today, young people look for employers that align with their core values. And this means that we can attract future top salespeople and AI experts because our sustainability is genuine, but it must be that. And in our case, I can take one concrete example, and that is that we have succeeded in transformation to a 100% fossil-free vehicle fleet, which generates interest among young people. So that is the short answer.
That's very interesting to also bring it into the managerial steering, but also, and I think with this answer, you're also sort of segueing into the next question, that I want to go back to Sara, but just as a reflection, our next question is, what is the value created for your company in doing so? And what you said, Håkan, is that, it actually allows you to attract top talent. Yeah. So it also has a not only a value in terms of output, or profit generated, but also in how you build your internal structures and the staff and the resources. So going back to you, Sara, briefly, we have a few more minutes, but if you take 1 or 2 minutes to answer in a nutshell, what is the main, if you would elevator pitch, what is the main value created for your company in competing through sustainability? And I mean, Stena Recycling is indeed sort of a business that operates on the basis of being sustainable and recycling things, but how would you describe it in a nutshell?
Thank you, Gabrielle. But for sure, we wouldn't survive if there weren't a demand for our products. So this is key. So, I mean, of course, if we're speaking of value, I need to start with our business being profitable, economically profitable, and also, I mean, I want to just second what Håkan said about attracting top talent, because young people and they're not so young anymore. I mean, we have several generations of recruited colleagues that sign on to myself included, and our top management, that we want to be a part of this. And but then also, I mean, we have an advantage in, for example, attracting deep green financing. So in investments and bonds to finance our own, expansion and adding on our market share. That is an advantage. But of course, and also I'd like to, beside of, us being profitable, we also need to make it profitable for our clients. So this is a win-win situation. When there is a demand for recycled material and refined recycled material that we produce, it needs to be an advantage and profitable for our clients. It's a win-win, definitely. And I can just to give you a few examples what we do beside of, I mentioned Stena Nordic Recycling Center, which is, by the way, 100% fossil free right now as we speak. We are continuously investing in fossil free construction equipment. We're investing in, as also Håkan mentioned, for Axfood, fossil free transport fleet. And this is what our customers also are looking for, because they're looking for not only targets, not only visions in future, statements about climate change. They're looking for concrete actions, and this is what we can provide with proof. So we have verified actions that we are following up upon, and this is what's giving us an advantage. So it feels good to be both profitable and to be able to say that we're signing up and delivering on the Paris Agreement.
Yeah, that's incredible. And also, just like you say, I mean, you also so mentioned it, Håkan, but market demand was one of those categories in this report that was truly standing out. Yeah. And that is one of those things, and we do that on a daily basis when we talk to policymakers, is there is a demand for this, right? There is
Right.
a demand for a duality in both thinking profitability and cost, but also sustainability.
If I can just add one thing, I mean, if we're going forward, we do need continuous policy change and policy benefits, because what we're looking into now and where we see demand upcoming is critical raw materials. So we have been providing copper, aluminum, and several critical raw materials for the markets since many years back.
Yes.
But we see an emerging demand for new critical raw materials that Europe needs for our resilience, for our electrification, for our information technology, and so on. And to do this, we need the policies that support this, both on the European and the Swedish level.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sara. And Håkan, a couple of minutes. What would you say in a nutshell? What is the value created? You've mentioned some great examples already in your first reply, but what is the value created for your company in competing through sustainability?
It's a very good question, and we have looked into that. And the first thing that struck us was that, well, actually, we're a company. We have 15,000 employees, and we are not a normal company because we don't own things. Other companies own properties, or they own other assets. And then we thought about this. We don't own our warehouses. We don't own our store facilities. The only thing we own is our transport fleet, and that is a rather small thing for a company. And after having that breakdown, we actually said that we need to attract the highly skilled employees, because this is the only asset we really have. We don't own them, but we can at least hire them. And we want them to feel that they are the core asset of the company. And if we look at people having spent the time in Axfood, I've been there in 12 years. I'm still a junior compared to those who have 20 or 30 years background. And that says something. They are feeling they are the most important asset.
Yeah.
And we do see that the consumer appreciate our transition clearly, but we have to come up with new things all the time. Otherwise, people will go to other chains and shop their meals. I should say that at the moment, it is a true challenge because politicians continue to lower diesel taxes, and that means that it's a real challenge for us. But we can also see, resilience is a key word here, that over time it will pay off to be independent of fossil fuels. So the short answer to you is that we see our staff as the core asset, and we need to be in line with them. And we also see that the consumers are expecting us to come up with new, highly initiative methods of food waste, or even better transports, less energy resource waste, and so on. So I think that is the core, and I think there is no alternative, to be honest, actually, because we can see that companies, some competitors who have not invested in sustainability, well, more or less, they will lose customers, and they will also lose the talents. And we don't want to go that way down the road. And we have the support of our shareholders, and that is important, that they are understanding why we are investing so heavily in sustainability. That was the short answer.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I love again that you're lifting the resource of your staff and the retention possibilities of actually also aiming for innovation, which is also one of the other categories that we talked about a lot, seeing potential in innovation. I want to say a big thank you to Sara and Håkan for joining in and sharing your 2 cents about your companies. And we have a few more minutes left, and I want to invite Romain, Pardo. Yes, and we have Image. Amazing. We had a bit of a challenge there as well. with the camera, but happy to see that you managed to sort it out. I just want to give a background. Romain Pardo, he's the Senior Program Manager at Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership based in Brussels. And the Haga Initiative is one of the European business networks that meet regularly, sort of under the steer of Romain and his colleagues, where we share experiences, we share ideas, we talk about how do we work towards pushing policies in our different countries and jointly do so also at a European level. So I want to invite you, Romain, to give a brief commentary from your perspective, situated in Brussels and working with, companies that push business leadership in this avenue on a daily basis. What are your thoughts, briefly?
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's great, again, to have the great partnership with the Haga Initiative. Congratulations for the report. I think it's very, very useful and very timely for a number of reasons. I particularly like the fact that, the background that we are in a period of structural shifts that will reshape markets, and the challenges that are ahead, that we see as continuous long-term challenges, the climate crisis, resource scarcity, but also other trends that are sort of shaping markets, including innovation, for example. And I really like the fact that I think it goes beyond what Håkan was saying in terms of beyond the mumbo jumbo and commitments to have those concrete examples of what companies are doing. Not only, so it's great to have, the individual examples, also combining different levers and drivers that enables them to really move towards more sustainable business models. And the rationale for it is something that we do share, of course, as CISL and CLG Europe, that sustainability and decarbonation are good for business, basically. And I think it really captures the economy-wide approach, the built environment, food, circular economy, transport, finance. And I think we're going to need all of this in order to bring structural change. So congratulations for that. I'm not surprised that Swedish companies are ahead of the curve when it comes to sustainability, but from a Brussels perspective, it's also part of a bigger momentum that's building up across member states, and in the EU as a whole. But there's always a need, I think, to really highlight those examples and be vocal in a period where we're navigating a little bit more of a challenging political context. So I thought that was brilliant. I think we're also in a period in the EU where there are, we have those trends, but there are some, let's say, some people say perma-crisis. When we move from one crisis to the other, we see what's happening in Iran at the moment. We're going to see a lot more challenges also in terms of resource security. And they are accelerating, I think, the way they're shaping markets as well. And so it's also, let's say, a make or break moment for businesses, so to speak. So I think that's very important. A last word from me, because I work a lot on policy with companies. So what Sara was saying in terms of not playing the piano by ourselves for companies, there's the question of the role of policies in supporting this change. And at a period where energy security, competitiveness, resource scarcity are making themselves at the forefront of the political agenda, I think it's valuable for businesses to show this leadership, but also for policies to be fit to provide what Sara was talking about, which is a long-term approach with carbon pricing, creating markets for climate and carbon, or circular and carbon neutral materials, or also in terms of encouraging circularity. So I think there's a role there. And it's a particularly, let's say, important period in the EU. It's a fork in the road moment, so to speak, because the decisions that are taken right now will have the ability to, let's say, accompany the transition, finally bring that long-term trends with short-term actions that are necessary for businesses to thrive. And we see a lot of resistance to that in terms of policymakers and so on. So, building on this momentum with examples, and coalitions, I think is particularly helpful. And also, given the examples in the business case studies in the report, how do we make sure that policies can reward front runners so that they can continue being ahead of the curve, shape the transition, and bring others in their midst?
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Romain, for your insights. And indeed, like you said, this is the moment and in time to be vocal, for sure, and push both, other businesses as well within the value chain and partnerships, but also policy and vice versa. So I want to thank everyone who's participated. And lastly, I just want to hand back over to Nina. We're a little bit past our due time, but Nina, please wrap this up.
Yes, thank you so much, Gabrielle. Listen to everything. And I just want to wrap up by quoting what Romain just said. We are in a time of structural shifts. That's exactly what's happening. And that's why I think this report is super important, because we just need to be reminded all the time that even if we hear about things that we don't like, we can see that it's people talking about the sustainability is not going as fast as we hope. And so the good examples from the companies and seeing that companies is still doing this and is still waiting, like we heard now recently, just in this webinar, waiting for more ambitious policies, just to be able to continue to innovate and to get the best talents and to be profitable, etc., is super important. So when you feel a little bit of, oh, this is not working, just look at our report and remind yourself of what companies are doing right now, because sustainability in businesses is here to stay. So I want to say thank you to Romain, to Håkan, to Sara, to Nussara for helping up with the report, and to Gabrielle. And I hope you all have a lovely day. Thank you.